Federico, we are here in a special, very special AppStories Plus because this is not your usual AppStories Plus pre-show segment that goes out to just the subscribers to AppStories Plus or to the Club Premier members. It's going out to the wider audience, which I'm really excited for everybody here and get a taste for what AppStories Plus is all about.
This one's on the house, as they say.
It is.
This one's on us.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had this idea of we basically never do this. AppStories Plus is usually exclusive to AppStories Plus subscribers or Club Premier members.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever done it.
I don't think we've ever done it. So it's the first time, but it's a very important time today. Not just because I'm publishing my iOS and iPadOS 18 review, but because of some of the ideas and some of the themes and concepts that I share in the review that I wanted to talk about with you in the pre-show. And I feel like it was when you proposed this idea of why don't we talk about those topics in the pre-show and we make it free for all to listen to instead of locking it to just members, I was immediately on board. I think it's a good idea, and I think everybody deserves to not just get a taste of AppStories Plus, which is a fine idea in and of itself, but also the things we wanted to share and we wanted to talk about. I think it's important that as many people as possible they listen to that segment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that was my thought behind it too, is that these are things that we want to talk about today that really are broader than just the audience of people who subscribe to the club or subscribe to AppStories Plus. So I guess we should get right into it and explain to people, first of all, if you haven't ever listened to AppStories Plus, this is part of it. This extended pre-show is what we do every single week. And it's usually, anywhere between like 10 and 20 minutes most of the time, sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. And the Plus version of the show is also ad-free. Comes out a day early. That is not true today because we are talking about your iOS and iPadOS 18 review, and we wanted everything to come out at the same time. But other than a handful of weeks every year, it comes out on Sundays, and it comes out in high bit rate audio too, which is, sounds a little better, which is kind of a nice perk as well. So those are all the perks of being a Club Premier member or an AppStories Plus subscriber. But I want to dive in right away with you and talk to you about this review because it's a very different kind of review. It breaks from kind of a long history. It's your 10th year. You wanted to do something different. Yeah. We've had a lot on our minds about the web, the open web, artificial intelligence, creativity. There's a lot of things that you and I think have been thinking about over the many months. And a lot of it, to me, having read your review, is embodied in this review. Yeah,
that is absolutely the context. Going into this, it's like a multi-layer thought process. So the first layer was, this is going to be my 10th review. I've been doing this thing every summer for 10 years, for a decade.
Wow.
I've been doing this for a decade. This is my 10th review. If we start counting with the iOS 9 review, which is where I start counting, this is my 10th annual review. Used to be just iOS, and then it became iPadOS. There was the 1 year when I skipped the iPadOS chapter. There was iPadOS 16 with Stage Manager, which got a standalone kind of scathing story on the site.
Yes,
but otherwise, I've been doing this for 10 years. And so in the back of my mind, the first thought was, I kind of want to do something special. And if we go down, Inception style, the other thought was, well, a lot has been on my mind over the past year regarding the open web and the role of these social networks, the Fediverse, and establishing MacStories as that sort of indie publication that embraces the open web. That's something that's been on my mind, especially since, and that was like the other layer, the importance of the indie web and indie creators and freelance artists in the face of artificial intelligence and generative AI, and especially the kind of generative AI that wants to replace what we do. It's the kind of generative AI that can write articles, or the kind of generative AI that can generate images, that can generate quote-unquote art. I think my position, your position, like our position on this should be pretty clear. We have written and published and sent an open letter to Congress and European representatives about our thoughts on the dangers of scraping the open web and artificial intelligence and the generative kind of artificial intelligence that aims to replace jobs for creators on the web. But all of that was on my mind as I was researching iOS and iPadOS 18. And initially, in June, we thought Apple Intelligence was going to be part of this review. And because it was confirmed that it was going to come later, not in June, but like at some point in late July, maybe, we got confirmation that it was not going to be available in the European Union, and it was not going to launch with 18.0 today, as you're listening to this. So initially the plan was, well, there's going to be Apple Intelligence. I don't know what I'm going to do. But at that point, I had to make a decision, right? Because I had this giant project ahead of me for the next 3 months. And I had all of those, I was coming from those couple of months of like really negative thoughts and like feeling down on honestly like my job and just being on the web and having your content just scraped and stolen from you, and seeing the same happen to to artists in other fields, illustrators, musicians, podcasters to an extent. Like I was feeling really down. And so I thought, well, I know that I want to do the review, but this is not going to be the vibe. If I am going to do my 10th annual review, it should be a fun one. It should be a different one. And I got to find a way to find a different mood, find a different vibe for it. And that was honestly, it was like a lot of soul searching. Going deep down to the very question of what is it that I like about my job? Like I actually reached that point. And so I started writing this note. I was having this conversation with Sylvia a month ago. I started writing this note on my phone. And the note, which I still have in my main notes folder, is called Tech That Keeps Me Excited. And it's just a list of things about my job, about tech, that still excite me today. Because I figured with this kind of project, I need to go back to my roots and I need to understand what is it that makes me obsess in a good way over what I do. What is it that still excites me? I've been doing MacStories for 15 years and these reviews for 10. So what is it that still keeps me, on my toes, so to speak? Like, what is it that still lights a fire under me? And so I started this note, and that was really great because it was an exercise in almost like it was actually a form of therapy when I think about it.
Oh, sure, yeah. And look, I give you a lot of credit for having really found a positive path through this too, because I have been kind of in the same place mentally as you have at times, and I have had similar conversations with Jennifer, who, as I explained to her some of this AI stuff, she said, this is what you hated about your old job, which really made me stop for a minute and think, oh boy. And so I did a lot of the same sort of soul searching myself about what does this mean? What does this mean? Yes. Where do we go? And how do we make this work? And so that, I feel like I've ended up in kind of a similar place, but it took quite a while. It took the majority of the summer, really.
Yeah, look, it's a process, right? So it's still ongoing, but and like you said at the beginning, this is about the review, but it's also not about the review. Like these themes, they are contained in the review, but they're part of a bigger conversation.
I think it's worth kind of calling out too the fact that I think the seeds for where your review goes were planted earlier in the year and even last year, as we started working with more people.
Exactly. That's what I was going to talk about next.
Okay.
The more I kept going in this sort of process, the more I realized beyond the things like the gadgets and the products and the services that keep me excited, whether it be handhelds or augmented reality glasses or wired ear pods. Yes, I'm not joking. But like besides that, like what is it? Like when am I truly happy? When I do my job. And I realized that there are different moments when I'm truly happy. And one of the things that makes me really happy is surrounding myself with other creative people. That's why I feel so good about the expansion of MacStories with new people, new voices. Just the act of surrounding myself with podcasters, writers, designers, composers, like being exposed to the craft and the art produced by other people, by other humans,
Yep.
I have always found so inspiring. And that is why I still listen to music every day. And in my much smaller corner of the internet, I realized working with other creatives and assigning tasks, delegating things I cannot do myself, and explaining my ideas to other people that can then use their skills and their expertise to make them happen, it makes me feel really good inside. Just being part of that process.
Right. And it also, part of it too, I think, is the process of combining your ideas with other people's
Yes.
ideas, right?
Yes.
Because
So,
there's this,
yeah.
right, there's this spark of creation and creativity that happens where maybe you had the initial idea, but then someone takes it and runs with it and makes it special and makes it their own in a way that you or I never could. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really exciting to see.
Yeah. And so to circle back to the review, that was sort of the context. I made two key decisions. Actually three. The first one, as you'll see in the review, I realized this year I am going to split the apps chapter with John. Now that Apple apps are basically cross-platform and there's a lot of overlap between them, you and I realized we're doing double the work to talk about the same
Yes,
things.
we're doing each other's work essentially. It feels like we're doing each other's work
Yes.
because that section of those reviews had become busy work because I knew you were doing the exact same thing I was doing, and it just wasn't worth the extra effort.
Yeah, it wasn't. So that's the first change, and it's something that is communicated in the apps chapter. The things you will not find in my review, we didn't forget about them. You'll find them in John's review and vice versa.
Yep.
The second decision was, this year, maybe this is something that started with my not an iPad Pro review story back in May, but this year I'm very much embracing the side of me where I don't want to say that I don't care about what I say anymore, because I do care about what I say anymore, but the side of me that was maybe dormant for a while of like pure straight opinion from the heart, which is, I don't know why, but a muscle that I had not exercised, I think, in a few years. Just that sort of vibe,
Yeah.
just very upfront, very honest, very direct, having fun with it in the process, And the third decision was, so I knew, I thought that Apple Intelligence was going to ship with iOS 18, but regardless, it's going to come out in a couple of weeks. And
Right.
I thought, when I saw at WWDC Image Playground and the, what's it called? Image Wand?
Genmoji?
Image
The what?
Wand?
Oh,
The
right,
Image
right.
Wand. Yeah, basically the feature of Apple Notes where you take one of your sketches and artificial intelligence turns it into a much prettier illustration.
Yep.
I thought, well, honestly, I'm disgusted by these features. I find them extremely gross and potentially dangerous for creatives. And so I thought, where Apple, like, this is happening, obviously, like these features are going to ship. This is happening this year. So where Apple is going to zig, I'm going to zag. That was my idea. I thought they're going to do generative AI this year because it's my 10th review. I want it to be different. I want to embrace the open web and creators. I am going to illustrate the review. I'm going to hire an artist, like a real human artist, and illustrate the review. Enough with the 3D renders. I've done them for several years at this point, and it was great. But this year, like, I wanted to make this subtle statement, or maybe not so subtle. I don't know. It depends how you read into it.
Yeah, I would say it was more of a degree of subtlety because those 3D renders were also artistic and creative in their own way.
Oh no, obviously, like I always worked like those renders. I never used any sort of AI tool. I want to make this clear. Whether I was working with Sam Beckett or Brian King or Michael Stieber before, I have always worked with people. But it's like I needed to visually make a point. visually and conceptually. Like Apple literally showed an illustration being created by AI, and that is not okay with me. And so visually, I had to make a clean break from the past, stylistically speaking. And that's how I had an idea, and I reached out to Scout Wilkinson. She was the same artist who worked with us on the Comfort Zone artwork for the Comfort Zone podcast. And so we started this process of, I approached her back in June, be like, hey, Scout, maybe I have another project for you, but it's a bigger one. And it's going to last 3 months. And you're going to have to deliver for sure in mid-September. And it's probably something you've never done before, but here we go. And so I talked about my idea and she immediately loved it. And so we started brainstorming. It was like a really long process of like trying to understand what is it that we want to convey? What is it, the vibe? What's the style? And that was one of the key, it'll be something I remember, right? For my job, like working with an artist to be like, how do we create something from nothing? Like these illustrations, all these chapters that we need to do. And a key turning point for us was one day Scout had sent me, and there's going to be a making of story. I'm going to get more into the details of this, but Scout sent me some drawings and they were great, but like, I don't know, inside of me, I felt like I needed to find like a different gimmick, like a specific twist on these illustrations. And so I thought, I kind of, how for a few years people made fun of my reviews by saying that they were instruction manuals.
Right.
I thought, I kind of want to embrace that, and I want to sort of make fun of myself, and in the process, sort of wink at those people. And I thought, here was my pitch to Scout, was basically, so I don't know if you've ever played the video game Firewatch. But in Firewatch, which is an excellent first-person game from a few years back, published by Panic and made by Camposanto, now part of Valve, I want to say. But yeah, so I thought, if you remember the video game Firewatch, the first-person perspective, when you open the map in Firewatch, when you're lost in the woods and you open the map and in first person, you see the hands of the character physically opening and unfolding a paper map in front of your eyes. I asked Scout, can we replicate that, but for like a fictional iOS 18 instruction manual? That would be my review. And so that was the turning point. And she took that idea of the first person perspective and she just ran with it. And so she came out with these different takes of the first person. It's not always the same person in the images. Right. You will see some of my hands, some of Scout's hands, the iPadOS chapter, which is like this very meta image. It's actually like the perspective of Scout working on her iPad, designing the review, like incredible.
I noticed that, yeah.
Incredible shot. And yeah, so that process of and working with Scout, and then later, much later in the summer, working with James Thompson to turn those illustrations, which were done on the iPad, they were done in Procreate. And by default, Procreate creates time lapses for every illustration. And so I had the thought, hey, what if those time lapses could be turned into screensavers that animate on your Mac's display and they bring the making of those illustrations to life in front of you? Sort of also to reinforce the idea that a human made this. And so I worked with a different kind of artist, an artist of code, if you will, which is James Thompson. And so working with James and then working with Chris Lawley, who created the promo video for us. Which is also something that we've never done before, that we have this year on our YouTube channel. So surrounding myself and obviously working with you, working with Devon, which has been my editor in the entire process of this review.
I don't know how we would have done it without Devon, given that all the OSs came out the exact same day. I mean, it's been a lot of work anyway, but without Devon, it wouldn't have been possible.
As always, big shout out to Devon. Devon, who worked on a review himself of visionOS.
Yes.
So, thank you, Devon, as always. But yeah, basically what I'm trying to say, and it's been 20 minutes, so bear with me. But what I'm trying to say is that the sort of theme that underlining the conclusion, which is the conclusion of the review, but it's really the conclusion of my thoughts. Not just it's about iOS and iPadOS, sure, but it's about the broader landscape and how the conversation in the Apple community will take a turn this year and in the coming months. Apple Intelligence is going to come out. This is happening. Generative AI is happening for text. It's going to happen for images. For all we know, it's going to happen for video. It's happening for video in other AI products. But I personally, I feel like I needed to say that I stand by creators, and nothing can come out that is going to replace working with an editor, working with a freelance artist, working with an illustrator, working with a video maker who listens to my ideas and knows exactly how to shoot a video and then comes up with ideas of his own, right?
Right.
That process of working with humans and being interested in what other people do with their devices, right? That's what I want MacStories to be about. And I know that we're on the same page on this in terms of like the direction that we want to steer MacStories toward. And it's something that I felt like I needed to say in my review. And writing that conclusion with I don't know if you noticed, John, with the very last link in the review is a reference to Undertale, the video game.
Yep.
And the very famous line of when you look at yourself in the mirror toward the end of the game and you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, and the text says, despite everything, it's still you. That is such a powerful quote in Undertale in its simplicity.
Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to sort of play around with that and be like, despite everything, it's still me. So spoilers, I guess, for the conclusion. But yeah, it was important for me to write the conclusion. It makes me feel really good reading it. And yes, so that was the context for the story.
Well done, Federico, because I think you did a really good job of conveying that along with your typical iOS and iPadOS review. And I think
there's also that, which is going to be what we'll talk about in the main show.
Yes, in just a minute.
Yeah.
But, I think for me, the thing that really struck home with all the things you've been working on with various people are the screensavers for the Mac, because what it really shows is it shows how technology in the hands of people, in the hands of artists, is a really great thing. I mean, this is not like an anti-technology message. Scout was using Procreate.
Oh yeah, all done on the iPad. Incredible story. Yes.
All done on the iPad, which allowed her to record every single stroke she made, from the roughest sketch to the beautiful finished product that you see in the review. And to me, it was mesmerizing and fascinating to watch those strokes laid down on the screen as a screensaver, because you're witnessing the creative process of somebody. And I find that just absolutely fantastic. And I guess just to close out our pre-show, I do want to read a couple of lines that I don't think that as of recording this you've read yet, but it struck me reading your review. And I wanted to kind of close out our perks article with a few things about what you've been talking about, which is that this review represents our vision of the future, a vision of the future of the web as a place where individual creativity thrives and is celebrated, and that our mission at MacStories is to do everything that we can to help make that a reality. And that's kind of my pitch at the end of the day for why I think I'd like people to consider joining Club MacStories, because this is probably, as you've also said in your review, more than any time in recent history.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff, like working with artists and things, just doesn't happen unless we have club members. So thanks to the club members, and thanks for everybody listening to this for, putting up with a little mini pitch here at the end. And, if you'd like to see more of this kind of stuff from Federico and from me and from the entire team, please consider joining the club, because it means a lot to us and it really does make what we do possible.
Yeah.
All right, Federico, let's dig into this review.
Let's do it.
Welcome to AppStories. Today's episode is brought to you by Sentry. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Good. Are you feeling rested, tired? How are you feeling as this review comes out?
Yes. Both of them.
All of the above.
I feel rested only because finally last night I was able to sleep for 8 hours, which is
that's good.
not something that I've done like in the past. I don't even know.
Yeah, it's been a
But
while for me too.
I'm tired because even though this year's review process was much shorter, the writing, a lot of things surrounding it, which we talked about in the pre-show, free for all this time to listen to. It was a long process. It was a 3-month process that just the writing happened in 2 weeks, but everything else was a very long process. So, but at the same time, I'm happy because this is, for me personally, it's my most important day of the year, and it's something that I look forward to for 3 months, and it's something that I dread for 9 months.
Yes.
But then when I'm doing it, it makes me feel really happy. So it's like this love-hate relationship, which is not really hate after all. It's more of a love relationship, and it's exhausting, but I am fortunate to be able to say that this is my job, and I wouldn't change it for anything else.
Yeah, well, I agree. And this year I feel like it felt more compressed, and maybe that's because everything's coming out on the same day, in past years. And I had a feeling this was going to happen this year just because these OSs are a little lighter weight than they have been in recent years. And so I figured macOS would be coming out on the same day as yours. We should let people know that in addition to your review, my review will be coming out tomorrow on Tuesday. Yes. As will the watchOS 11 review from Jonathan Reed. And then we also have a visionOS 2.0 review from Devin Dundee. And so Devin's will be out on Wednesday, I believe. So that's kind of the current plan as we record this. And so we figured, we could have dropped these all at once, but that's tens of thousands of words that I don't think would be very productive or fair to drop on everybody at once.
We could have flexed. We could have done it, but we chose not to because it was going to be useless, right? Just to drop everything all at once. Instead, it's going to be like imagine MacStories this week as a fancy restaurant where each day of the week is going to be a different course, and we're going to take you through this operating system menu of sorts throughout the course of the week. That's what we're gonna do.
Yes, and for dessert, we've got perks if you're a member of Club MacStories. All
This
right?
analogy, this metaphor needs to stop now. Otherwise, I'm gonna be hungry for the rest of the episode. All right, so we talked about the context of the review and the concepts behind it in the pre-show, which AppStories Plus, which every AppStories member, AppStories subscriber can listen to this week. This is something we've never done before. We felt that it was important for everybody to be able to enjoy a preview of what AppStories Plus is typically like, but also the topics and the themes that we discussed in this episode. We thought, let's make an exception for once and make sure that everybody can listen to this segment. Before we dive into the actual details of iOS and iPadOS, John, can you quickly recap the perks and the extras that are coming this week for all levels of Club MacStories?
All right. Well, perk number 1 is the extended version of AppStories that is going out to everybody who listens to AppStories. So you get the pre-show segment. But for Club members, Club MacStories members will get both your ebook, which will be out at the same time the review is out. You just go to your downloads page at the club and you can get that there. And Club MacStories members can also expect to get a special edition of MacStories Weekly, which will come out on Saturday and feature Federico's annual Making of Story. So that'll be there for regular Club MacStories members as well as everybody at the other tiers too, because Club MacStories Plus members are going to get a bunch of bonuses. They're going to get an ebook. They're going to get an ebook of my macOS review for Sequoia. They're going to get an ebook of the watchOS 11 book from Jonathan Reed and the visionOS 2 review.
And you get an ebook. And you get an ebook. And you
right.
get an ebook.
And you think, oh, okay, well, that's it. That's 4. No, there's another. Federico has created a tips and tricks ebook that is also going to go out to Club MacStories members, Club MacStories Plus and Premier members. So all of that is going to be available for Plus and Premier members. But there's more. There really is.
Yeah.
Because Scout's illustrations are absolutely wonderful and beautiful. We have turned those into wallpapers, which look great on an iPad or a Mac. There are 6 of them in full color, high resolution. They're absolutely gorgeous. You'll be able to download those from the Club Downloads page. And James Thompson took the Procreate videos that were made by and generated automatically when Scout was doing her artwork, turned those time lapses of her creating the images into screensavers for the Mac. So you will be able to install these on a Mac, pick between 6 different screensavers, or just have them show up randomly, and also even adjust how quickly they play out, whether it's fast or slow. And I'll tell you, I had to kind of like stop myself from just sitting there and watching each one of these over and over again, because I find it just fascinating to watch Scout put these images together. So there's that. And of course, because there's so much, we asked our friend Chris Lawley to put together a special promo video. So instead of just listening to everything I just said and rattled off, or reading our long article on MacStories, watch Chris's 1.5-minute video, and you'll get a sense not only of what's available, but you get to kind of see some of these wallpapers and the screensaver in action. So Chris did a fantastic job. We're really fortunate to have him help us out with that. And I guess with that, Federico, we should get into the review itself.
Yeah, what do you want to talk about? Just quiz me, ask me whatever, and I'm the guy. Right. Yeah.
This is a weird year. And so first of all, I want to ask you, how did you approach this review, given that you knew going into this, as we published this, as did I with macOS, that probably within a month to 6 weeks, we'll have the very first parts of Apple Intelligence. So in a way, to me, this feels like a baby step release. It's not your typical .0 release. So how did you kind of juggle that?
Yeah. Well, I decided that I was going to ignore Apple Intelligence and instead focus on the things for iOS and iPadOS that make it fun and make me happy to use it. So I channeled all of my energy into appreciating things like home screen customization, Control Center, and the productivity apps, so notes, reminders, calendar, and some modern apps like Journal, which is getting a really fancy upgrade in iOS 18. So my approach was, and this is also something that I wrote in the conclusion, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to take advantage of generative AI features. And they're even not going to be available for me now in Europe. Right. So instead, all of this energy that I have inside of me is going into the things that I like. And this is also something that we talked about in the pre-show for AppStories Plus. I'm just going to concentrate on the aspects of iOS and iPadOS that, despite everything, still make them my favorite operating systems for phones and tablets. Just I love. Why is it that I love using them? And the answer is the things you will find in the review that I covered in the review. Everything that I covered is because I wanted to. And it's because I have thoughts for improvements, criticism, or things that I want to mention, things that I want to explain, things that maybe can be useful to other people. But yes, that was sort of my approach.
This special episode of AppStories is brought to you by Sentry. Sentry are the folks who help you avoid your mobile app being the one that gets deleted next. From getting deep context into crashes to seeing full insights on performance issues, Sentry is here to make sure your code doesn't suck. Fix what's broken faster and keep your app running smoothly with application monitoring built for mobile developers. You can even use their session replay for mobile to get video-like reproductions of their user sessions. That way you'll be able to reproduce issues faster and get a better understanding of user impact. Tools like Sentries are incredibly important for developers because I know when I download a new app and I have a bad experience out of the box, I'm likely to probably delete it. Users don't have a lot of patience these days, and when they run into roadblocks, they don't come back to the app. And even if they don't delete it, it may just sit on their phone endlessly, completely unused. But you can avoid that outcome by using Sentry. It's the perfect way to keep your mobile users happy. The great news is that Sentry is totally free to use, too, so there's no reason not to check it out. Just go to Sentry.io, that's Sentry.io, to get started for free, and mention you heard them from AppStories. That's Sentry.io, and let them know you heard about them from us. Or just go to the show notes and click the link. Our thanks to Sentry for their support of AppStories. Well, there are two major sections of this review, I would say. You can kind of put things into two buckets. One is customization features that are kind of OS level features.
Yes.
And then there are the apps themselves. Tell me a little bit, I guess, about customization. Why don't we explain kind of at a high level what it is that Apple has done this year? Because to me, it's interesting that they've gone quite far beyond widgets, which has been kind of the focus over the last few years.
Yeah, the focus has been on widgets so far. This year, they have embraced, I would say that inside that bucket, there are two smaller buckets.
Right.
One of them is icons, and the other is control center. So they have embraced icon customization in a couple of different ways. There's the fact that finally you can rearrange your icons to be wherever you want. Well, kind of, because like there's still an underlying grid, but you're not bound to the grid anymore, in the sense that you can now place your icons at the bottom or at the top, and you can leave empty rows between them, like you can leave empty spots. But it's not like actual free form placement like Android. The icons still need to fall into one of the predetermined slots. It's just that now you can have empty space between icons. So if you want to have a fancy layout with like group of icons in the corner, or all the icons at the bottom, and leave half of your home screen empty at the top, now you can do that. So there's that. Then there's the icon colors, and Apple is doing a couple of things here as well. There's dark mode icons, which can be tied to system dark mode or not. You can choose to enable dark mode icons even if you're using your OS in light mode, for example. There's small and large icons. Small icons is like regular size icons is what you know and use. Large icons is a new version of home screen icons that get larger and don't have the icon label underneath them. This has become my preferred way to use icons on my home screen. But as I mentioned in the review, I would have preferred Apple to make the text label disappearing like an option, not tied to large icons necessarily.
Right.
I would have liked to see small icons without text labels, but that's not possible.
Yeah, I think that's what I would have done. I think if I were given the choice, I would take the text labels off and leave my icons small.
Probably.
Although I've been using the large icons for the last, I don't know, month and a half, and they've really grown on me. So I haven't.
Same.
I don't think I'm going to turn them off either.
Same. They're comfortable to reach, and you get bigger artwork for those icons, so it's kind of nice. Then there's the icon tinting, which is something that I fundamentally dislike, and I think Apple's approach is misguided here. So the icon tinting is this idea of letting you apply like a color filter to icons. And the way that Apple has done it is sort of very different from what you typically see on places like Gumroad or Pinterest, like these icon packs that people make. With icon tinting on iOS 18, by default, all the icons get a dark gray background. And what's changing is the color of the glyph, right, of the icon. But the icons are always dark. And what you can turn, I don't know, purple or yellow or green or blue is the glyph. And the way that it looks is like, it almost looks like you're applying a color filter on top of the icon. And the results can be, most of the time, in my opinion, quite ugly. Even if I go to apple.com and on the iOS 18 preview page, the marketing images that Apple should be using as like fancy looking marketing images to entice you to upgrade to iOS 18, like even those coming straight from Apple, I found them very, very ugly personally.
I think the fundamental problem that Apple has here is that, if you look at those icon packs that you're talking about that you see on Gumroad and places like that, they are typically designed by one person and they are applying a similar style to the icons of a bunch of different companies, whether it's WhatsApp or Google Maps or Messages or whatever it happens to be. And Apple can't do that. They can't redesign the artwork. So instead, they're doing what I guess is another component of what you see in a lot of those icon packs, which is a similar color scheme. And the color scheme without the cohesion of similar artwork, I think just makes it not work as well.
Yeah. I don't know. I would like to see a different approach. Like, for example, actually make the icons of a different color and then the glyph always white or always, Ben McCarthy on Threads suggested a mock-up with what I'm talking about, and that's exactly the approach I would have liked to see. And also is the fact that this icon tinting applies to all icons. So you cannot say just these 4 icons I want to make green, or these other 4
Right.
icons I want to make blue. No, it
Or
applies
just
to
this page. A
or
page
just this
thing would be
page.
nice. Yeah.
If you want to customize pages, I believe you need to sort of do the whole dance of setting up a focus mode that only
Right.
shows you the page, and then in that case, it's the whole thing. They should have just
Yes.
said, let me make this page, or let me make these individual icons. But then again, the fact of the matter is, I don't like the approach. They should have tinted the icon, not just the glyph. And so hopefully this will be improved in the future. I don't like the look. We'll see. Maybe people will come up with layouts that look nice. But in addition to icons, there's Control Center. And this is my favorite aspect of iOS 18, I think.
Yeah, mine too.
Control Center now going back after 8 years, going back to a multi-page structure. This time, they're not horizontal pages like in the days of iOS 10. Apple is going to do vertical pages for Control Center. And Control Center, you can now freely customize. You can resize, rearrange controls. You can duplicate controls across multiple pages if you want to. And you can install third-party controls. And those third-party controls are very similar to widgets in the sense that they are based on the same technology behind the scenes. A lot of your favorite apps that already have widgets or shortcuts actions are also most likely going to offer Control Center widgets, because all of those 3, shortcuts actions, widgets, and controls, they're all based on the same tech, which is App Intents and WidgetKit. Like, those technologies are shared across those different features, and even like controls are actually installed and configured with basically the same UI of widgets. You have, instead of a widget gallery, you have a controls gallery, which looks the
Right.
same. There's a search box that you can scroll and you can find different types of controls. And when you long press on a control, or when you tap it, if you are in Control Center's own jiggle mode, you can configure a control with the back panel that looks the same as a widget, like when you configure a widget on the home screen or the lock screen. And I don't know, but like the fact that I've been able to make my now playing control bigger or smaller, have a page that's dedicated to HomeKit controls, and add some of my favorite shortcuts to Control Center. Like customizing that, it's still an ongoing process, but like for the kind of iOS and iPadOS user that I am, just tweaking things and optimizing things to my needs, it's been a dream come true.
Yeah, no, I like it a lot too. And even before we had very many third-party controls, I already had like 3 different pages set up similar to you. I had kind of a catch-all, a home one, and then a music one. And they've just been really handy to have there. I think the thing that I still don't like is that you have to reach up to the top right corner in order to get to these. Makes it very hard to do this kind of thing one-handed. Yet at the same time, it is really nice to have more options and an ability to change sizes and rearrange everything.
Yeah. And those controls, I think it's important to mention, you can also tie them to the action button, and you can also put them on the lock screen. So for example, you can change the flashlight and the camera launchers at the bottom of your lock screen for something else, including support for third-party camera apps.
Yeah.
Obscura by Ben McCarthy, and I believe Halide as well. They're going to have controls that you can put at the bottom of the lock screen to press and launch that third-party camera instead. That is based on the locked camera capture and extension, which is new in iOS 18. And it's got a nice perk in that when you launch a third-party camera app from that control on the lock screen, you will not need to authenticate with Face ID or Touch ID, just like with Apple's camera app. However, swiping on the lock screen is still gonna default to the Apple camera app. However, in Europe, we will soon be able to delete the camera app. So I wonder if that gesture will become eventually customizable.
Or if it'll go away, or whether it'll just crash your iPhone.
Do nothing. I don't know. So yeah, that's customization. And the bigger point of customization, I guess, is that we have been talking about this for the past few years. This is only continuing with iOS 18. The modularization of apps, splitting app functionalities. And we talked about this for episode 400. This is only going to continue. Like the fact that you can now access functionality from your favorite apps with widgets on the home screen, the lock screen, the shortcuts, Siri, now controls, the action button. Like the experience of using an app hasn't been about just launching its icon on the home screen for a while, but now it's really growing into a bunch of different places in iOS and iPadOS. And the fact is, only Apple has this sort of ecosystem of third-party apps that have all of these kind of native extensions, which is the part of iOS that I still love to cover. And so definitely customization has been the highlight for me this year.
Yeah, no, it's been a highlight for me as well. You know, Federico, before we get to some of the apps and some of your favorite system apps, I do want to talk to you about iPadOS. It's going to be a short conversation, I think, because there's not a lot new in iPadOS that isn't also on iOS. But I want to, before we get into those few changes, I think we should shout out the fact that your review sponsor this year is Details Pro. Yeah. And Details Pro came through for us with some great templates that show off some of the new design elements in iOS and iPadOS. And the reason I'm mentioning it now is because one of those are the tab bars, which are one of the few things that are different about iPadOS, which you can talk about in a second. But if anybody listening to this is a designer or an app developer, you can go to the review, you can look at those templates, but you can also download them from Details Pro, which has a free version of the app. So you can download those templates and start playing with them and seeing how it might work with your next app idea. So, big thanks to Details Pro for sponsoring your review this year.
Yeah. iPadOS. I don't know. What can I say about iPadOS?
Tab bars.
Tab bars, I am not convinced that they are a superior alternative to sidebars, especially if you're using an iPad Pro in landscape with a keyboard most of the time. Tab bars, they feel better optimized for portrait when horizontal space is obviously a consideration that you need to make. But in landscape, I don't know why I would move away from sidebars that show me more content, more sections, and they're just a click away.
I've been thinking about this, and I wonder if this is really being driven more by something like the iPad mini than it is the larger iPads.
Maybe you have a point there. I mean, if there's a new iPad mini coming, but then why, I don't know, why launch it on the iPad Pros? I don't know. It's an option. Thankfully, it's an option. You can keep using sidebars and totally ignore the new tab bars, which are called tab bars, but they're not at the bottom. They are at the top. So it's confusing.
They're an evolution. They're very different than traditional tab bars.
Yeah. They don't have icons, they're just text, and you can only put a limited number of them in the top bar. Music has a nice implementation of the top bar in that it's also customizable, so you can drag some of your playlists from a sidebar into the top bar. But then again, I don't know why I would not use the sidebar, which shows me all of my playlists
Instead
with
of just a couple.
full
Yeah.
names and artwork right there in the sidebar. So I don't know. I'm a huge fan of sidebars. That version of iPadOS, I believe it was iPadOS 14 with the whole like desktop class initiative. That was good, Apple. Please, more of that. But yeah, otherwise, iPadOS. Big focus on Apple Pencil, which you covered previously on MacStories
Right.
with a standalone article. Oof. And besides that, it's what calculator. There's calculator on the iPad now, which I get the meme, right? The joke like, oh, where's calculator for iPad? This is like when the weather app was not available on the iPad. Now there's
Right.
calculator. I mean, you could have literally just opened the App Store years ago and downloaded pCalc or any other calculator for your iPad, but now there's a free one, and I gotta hand it to Apple. Apple being Apple, they were able to productize the calculator app with math notes, which is also something that you covered previously. It's
Right.
also this integration between calculator and notes, right? Sort of like Apple's version of the Solver app, where you can type your calculations almost in natural language and you can assign variables. And it's basically working with calculations, but as text rather than a calculator number pad, which is fascinating. Not something that I'm going to use a lot, but it's a way to make the calculator's arrival on iPad feel a little more special. And from a technical perspective, it's also fascinating to see these ongoing efforts to cross-pollinate between apps, right? Math notes in calculator and the Notes app, but also like reminders in calendar, which is something that I also covered in the review. So this is another trend worth keeping an eye on. An app instead of another app, sort of like Apple's approach here, I think is fascinating, and it makes sense because they make all the apps, so why not let them talk to each other?
Yeah, voice memos and notes is like that too.
Voice
I mean, you've got the ability to record audio and have it automatically transcribed, and it works essentially the same in both apps.
And there's gonna be with Apple Intelligence, there's gonna be the transcriptions from the phone app. They're also
Yep.
gonna be available in Apple in the Notes app. So yeah, this integration between multiple places, so sort of reminders being in calendar, notes becoming like this central repository for like a bunch of different types of notes. Yes, please. Like this is really good stuff, and it's the sort of Apple that I really like.
Yeah, me too. The other app I think we should talk about is Notes, because I know you used Notes extensively in your the research phase of your review. What was it about the changes this year to Notes that really drew you to use it full time this summer?
The text highlights were great. The ability to fold headings so that
Yeah,
to
that's a big one.
collapse sections, making a long note easier to navigate. That was great. The new ways to paste URLs and turn them into rich links. Between rich links and text highlights, you really have a bunch of ways to make notes visually stand out, which has been great. Re-embracing quick notes was one of the highlights for me this summer.
That's one that fits really well with like the ability to replace the widgets on
Exactly.
the lock screen, for instance, right? I've done that, and I can take a quick note just from my lock screen now.
Exactly. Just that's exactly what I'm doing. Like take a quick note from your lock screen, and then it's a retraining muscle memory, right? Because yes, I am used
for
to
sure.
swiping, but I'm also used to long pressing in the bottom right to open the camera. So this is something that I've been relearning after like, I don't know, a decade of that design, possibly even more.
It's a thing too, though. I think is going to really benefit people who use focus modes heavily, because you don't probably need that flashlight during the day most of the time. So why not replace it with something a little more useful and maybe have an evening focus mode that maybe puts it back in place?
I actually wanna. This is something that I need to do now that I'm done with the review. Like, I have tried. I feel like as an iOS user and as an iOS reviewer, I have lived all the possible lives that I wanted to live. I've been I've been the person with lots of home screens. I've been the person with just one home screen. I've been the person with a pure black wallpaper. I've been the person with a really multicolor wallpaper. I've been the person with 12 different focus modes for every single activity in my life. I've been a person who used to time track every single aspect of his life. And then I've been a person with 0 focus modes. And so like I've seen it all. But still, I kind of want to make another attempt at using focus modes. The idea of just an evening one, even just simple things like replace the flashlight, that could be really useful.
Well, see, that's where I've kind of landed, is that I have a focus mode for the evening that's almost identical to the one I use during the day, but it makes just a few little tweaks, like it adds a page of games to the focus so that if I want to just pick up my phone and play a quick game, they're right there, but that's not there distracting me during the day when I'm working. It's just little things like that. I change it around a little bit on the weekend too, but it's really, at this point, I guess I have a fitness one too, so that my phone's not bothering me if I'm out for a walk or something. But for the most part, I'm only ever in 2 or 3 focus modes in any given day.
Let me think about other apps that I want to mention. Journal, getting a really great update in iOS 18. Search, the new Insights page with stats for your journaling, streak. Widgets that prompt you with different types of reflection prompts on the home screen. The ability to now track your mood, powered by Apple Health. Inside Journal, another cross-pollination of things in Apple platforms. New types of suggestions, types of workouts and exercise, even if you don't wear an Apple Watch. In theory, there is support for something that Apple calls generic media suggestions. This is something that I want to clarify.
Didn't look so great when you were in your review. It seems like there's not much there.
So, Apple said, and I double-checked, and they confirmed this is what they're saying, that apps that use the Now Playing API will be able to opt out from donating this music or podcasts that you listen to the Journal app. So, Apple is saying, as long as you see an audio source in the Now Playing control center, because that's basically what it is, right? The Now Playing API means you got a control. You got a Now Playing control in Control Center and on your lock screen. So, in simpler terms, if you're listening to Spotify or if you're listening to Castro or Pocket Casts, now the Journal app will be able to suggest music that you listen to in Spotify or podcast episodes that you listen to in third-party podcast apps. Because so far, Journal was only limited to Apple Music and Apple Podcasts. Great. And I mean, obviously, I use Spotify, we have used Castro, we have used Pocket Cast, we use Overcast. Those apps, they all integrate with the Now Playing API. And I doubt that Marco Arment or Automatic is opting out of generic media suggestions, right, for Journal. I could be convinced otherwise for Spotify, but I don't think they are. Regardless, I have never seen these generic media suggestions. I have seen it one time for Spotify. Inside Journal, I took a screenshot. I saved it all summer. It was a suggestion for music that I listened to in Spotify without a deep link, without the artwork. It was just a black card with the Spotify logo and the name of the song I listened to. And that was it. I double-checked with Apple. They said, as long as they use the Now Playing API, they will show up in the recent view of the suggestions. No, they don't. So maybe this will start working at some point in iOS 18. But so far, enjoy that screenshot in the review because this is all I was able to capture this summer.
And that was early in the summer and you hadn't seen it since, right?
No, never again. So it happened that one time. But yeah, otherwise, really big fan of Journal, how it's growing. I hope we get an iPad version next. I mentioned reminders in Calendar. Really, I called it in my review, I believe, the unsung hero of iOS 18, the Calendar app. Excellent integration with reminders. And then, obviously, photos. We need to mention photos.
Oh, of course, yes. Huge update.
We talked about it before. I shared my opinion. John, you let me know what you think of the new Photos app now. I've shared enough opinions. Okay, now it's your time to share. What is your opinion?
I love it, and I actually, unlike you, I think I enjoyed it from the get-go, because I looked at it and I thought about my wife, who spends a lot of time looking at old pictures of her kids. She goes back and she looks at those old pictures all the time. She likes the automatically generated, memories and things like that. She watches all that stuff, and it feels like an update that is geared towards people who like that. They want to browse. She browses photos in the way a lot of people browse social time feeds, social feeds. She scrolls through, looks at old pictures, goes through old vacations, all that kind of stuff. And I think that this is a better way to do that than what we had before. You still have the ability to do that, to go back by day or month by month or year by year. That hasn't gone away. But there is a greater emphasis on kind of curated collections of different kinds in your photos, and a lot of ways to customize it, which I really like. I haven't spent a lot of time with this yet, customizing it, but there are things like recent days, which I know that you called out in your review, which I think is one of the nicer ones, where you can just kind of like, maybe the weekend rolls around and you're just hanging out and you want to look back on your week. You can do that. You can go and see that dinner you went out on, with some friends earlier in the week, or the trip to the beach, or whatever it happens to be. And it's a nice way to kind of look back at recent memories. But there are things like trips, other collections that automatically look and see, this must have been a trip, because here you are by the ocean and, you're hundreds of miles from your home. And it does a very nice job putting those together and making them, picking out what are really kind of the nicer pictures and giving you a nice overview of a trip you might have taken. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of it. I mean, it evolved a little bit during the beta period. Mm-hmm. I think that I like you, like this carousel that was in the early betas, that went away. But I do think that the designers at Apple have kind of landed on a nice balance between the familiar, which, let's face it, the UI for photos has been relatively the same for quite a long time. And that's an app that a lot of people use, and you don't want to kind of like throw everything out the window and disrupt everybody's use of one of the more beloved apps on the iPhone. But it does also introduce these new ways to browse your photos in a way that doesn't totally disrupt the existing experience. And I think that balance was just struck really well.
Yeah, I completely agree. We talked about the conclusion in the pre-show.
We did. We had an introduction about the conclusion.
So the introduction was about the conclusion. Nice. No, I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple things from the Everything Else chapter.
Okay.
Screen sharing with remote control. We tested this.
This was fun to demo with you.
This was fun to demo. So screen sharing was already a thing in FaceTime for the past couple of years. And now you can ask to remotely control somebody else's device. So this is going to be great for technical assistance, for relatives, friends, family, like someone who doesn't know how to do anything. Maybe they changed the setting. Maybe they need to do something in an app. You can just be like, hey, let's hop on a FaceTime call and I'm going to help you out. And it's not just, you can show them now things by tapping and drawing on the screen, and they will see your taps and your drawings. But you can also just say, hey, you know what? Just let me control your phone for a second and I'll do it for you. And now you can do that. And so that worked really well. And you can see the examples of like some of the privacy protections that Apple put in place for this feature. Really well done. What else? I'm trying to think. Is there anything else that I need to mention from the Everything Else chapter? Let me see. There's the ability to hide and lock apps with Face ID, something that I appreciate. Right. And if you have something sensitive, you can either hide the app entirely from your home screen, from basically everywhere in your device, and it'll end up in a hidden folder of the app library, or you can just apply a Face ID or Touch ID lock to any app that you want to protect because you think it contains sensitive data. And lastly, I will mention the super fancy flashlight live activity, which is
Yes.
what I close my review with. It's the extremely extra and unnecessary, but pretty cool, regardless, live activity in the dynamic island for the flashlight that allows you to adjust the intensity and sort of the light projected horizontally.
Yeah, it's like the width of the beam, basically.
The width of the beam, yeah, projected by the flashlight. Incredible design, totally unnecessary. This is how the person that designed the action button settings screen continues working every year.
Yes.
The same person in charge of all these extra designs is continues to find new tasks every year. So good job, incredible design, unnecessary, but I love it.
Yeah, it's a bit of an extra flourish that everybody can enjoy on their iPhone starting today.
So that's the review.
All right. Well, congratulations, Federico. I know that this is a lot of work, a lot of late nights, a lot of thinking for a lot of months. So congratulations on finishing it. And, look, we can all look forward to reading your review from the comfort of a chair. If you're a club member, you can get the ebook. And we're not finished, as I said at the outset. We've still got the Sequoia review, watchOS 11, and visionOS 2 all coming out, along with all the extra perks and things for club members. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be a busy week on the site, and we're not even close to finished.
We've only just begun, really.
This is the tip of the iceberg, as they say. It's an important tip of the iceberg, but it is just the iceberg. So don't become the Titanic and get sunk. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense? I don't think it does.
It's not as good as the restaurant metaphor, but I'll still take it. I'll take it.
All right. Well, thanks again, everybody, for listening. I hope everyone enjoyed the extra bonus AppStories Plus pre-show that we had this week for everyone. You can find the two of us over at MacStories.net. We're on Mastodon. Just go to Viticci.MacStories.net and JohnVorhees.MacStories.net to follow us there. And we're on Threads and Instagram. Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.